Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be sharing today. Thank you first to Guido for making sure things don't go too terribly wrong, and then to CAF as well for hosting this conference. What an amazing opportunity! I'm really excited to join a couple of the sessions that are later on over the next couple days. And then thank you all for showing up on in your morning, bright and early. I'm really excited, hoping you can get some value out of this. Like Guido mentioned, I'm going to have my email, my phone number at the end of the presentation. We'll also make this presentation and some other resources that I talk about available. So don't feel like you need to take a whole lot of notes or anything like that. This will all be available after the fact, and I'm always happy to have a call and go over things that we've talked about today in the future. So we'll get into it. Today, we're going to be talking about why this work is important. I'm going to have an overview on AI in grant writing, and then we'll talk about a structured approach to writing grants which can leverage AI. We'll do a bit of a live demonstration. We'll see how that goes, and then we'll wrap up with some questions. So first, why is this work important? Farmers provide a valuable social service. I really like Wendell Berry, who says good farmers who take seriously their duties as stewards of creation and of their land's inheritors contribute to the welfare of society in more ways than society usually acknowledges or even knows. So because of this, I really think that farmers deserve better. Small farmers are the backbone of America. They're really important for creating sustainable local food economies, which keeps us healthy and happy as people. And although they do important work, many farmers value taking care of their land, their animals, and their communities more than they do maximizing their profit. And if we want these types of values to flourish, which I think most people probably in this room do, it's really important that we support farms that are doing agriculture this way. And so the reason that I'm a grant writer for agricultural organizations is because I want to support farms who are doing agriculture this way and help us to slowly build the number of people who can viably do it. So grants can help to increase the profitability and viability of small farms. In particular, things like increasing their profitability, their customer base, product offerings. There's lots of different grant programs, lots of different things. I like to highlight, you know, this first example is a dairy that was able to get multiple grants over time. I think about 4 or 5 that totaled up to a very large amount. There also can be grants that are viable when you're getting started. Usually we don't see them for people before you are a farmer, but in their second year of farming, we've seen people get things like the value added producer grant. And then even people who are farm adjacent, who are not farmers themselves, but work with farms, can also be part of the grant ecosystem, helping farmers to grow through things like the Rural Energy for America program. So we've seen that grants can help throughout your growth, both when you're first getting started and as you continue to scale and try to share that impact with other farms. So I wanted to start with some of your experience. It might be a bit chaotic if we come off mic, but I'm wondering if people want to put into the chat and just share a little bit about your experience with grants. So I'd love to hear, have you ever applied for a grant before? If yes, what kind of grant was it? Did it help you grow your business? How so? If you've never applied for a grant, what is it that has stopped you? And have you ever tried to use AI in your grant writing? Would be very uh, appropriate for today's discussion. Or whether you've used AI or not, maybe what's something that you wish somebody had told you before you started? Thank you so much, Ben, for participating. Um, it sounds like, yeah, there's some organizations that you work with that apply for a lot of grants. Would love for people to share in the chat as well. We're hoping that this can be a good intro for people that you can feel more confident to approach grants. And we'll talk about some of the common problems and give you a structured approach that could hopefully make it a little bit easier. Oh, Tema, good job with the business builders. We'll talk a little bit about that specific grant program today. I was really excited to see those regional food business centers. I think that really was one of the #1 opportunities for small scale farms and regional food systems. So hoping that those will come back in the future. A SARE grant, bioremediation post-fire, nice. Oh, you're a grant writer. Hey, okay, well, you'll have to give me some feedback on what I'm saying, and let me know what could be better. Nice, got some experience. with and without AI. Awesome. Yeah. So also a lot of the talk today is focused more so on for-profit farms. There is kind of a divide in my mind between nonprofit grant writing and for-profit grant writing. They just tend to have different styles in the way that you tell the story. For-profits, you're talking more about the business viability, your revenue, customer base, how it impacts like your business model. Whereas with nonprofit grants, a lot of times it's more of that impact focused of how many people have we fed or how many farms have we trained, things like that. So they're slightly different. We tend to focus more on the for-profit side on this particular presentation, but a lot of what we're talking about can be adapted to both. I haven't, but I'm looking to not feel shame for using it. It sounds like maybe that's AI, or potentially grants. And that actually is something that we're going to talk about today. So thank you all for sharing, and we might be able to dig back into your responses. But as we go, it sounds like there's quite a range of expertise, so it'll be good to kind of cover the whole gambit today. So why grant writing feels so hard? In my experience, what I hear from people is kind of like these four main things, right? Is the number one reason is time. We work with a lot of people who have written their own grants, have won grants, and they could do it on their own, but obviously you're an entrepreneur, you're running a business, you're already working an off-farm job and running your farm. And the idea of sitting down at a computer and spending 30 or 40 hours on an application is just, the last thing that you want to do. Obviously, then you don't do it right away, and suddenly it's due in a week, and it just becomes it's not very feasible. So that's one of the biggest barriers. And in particular, AI helps, I think, with the time issue. It also can help because RFAs are dense and technical. That's usually what you call a request for an application, where the kind of the grant solicitation document. It can feel so big, and you don't know where to start, and that can cause you to delay as well and take more time doing things that aren't moving you forward. I think it really helps you to kind of just take the next step that you need to take to evaluate and be able to move forward confidently. But it just can feel intimidating. You don't really understand some of the jargon that they're using and what's allowable, what isn't. Um, AI can help you to assess things like that, and it won't get view any numbers, but it can help you kind of organize yourself. And then the fear of doing it wrong is a big piece that can make people just not even consider doing it. So AI can help cut through a lot of this. AI is a powerful tool, can be used for good or for evil, depending on who's using it. As stewards, I think we're called to use what we're given responsibly, not to hide things away. And so we did grant writing well before AI existed, and we still are. We're trying to slowly integrate it into our process. And I think there's good ways to do that and bad ways to do that. But I do think it's a powerful tool that especially in the sustainable agriculture community, we already are at a disadvantage in so many ways compared to maybe conventional systems. And AI is an opportunity to level the playing field a little bit. We still need to use discretion and caution, of course. But when I think about the kind of some of the challenges or conflict with AI, I think about it's still a new technology. So the last thing that I saw was that Gemini currently has a per prompt energy impact. So each time you kind of ask it a question, it's the same energy use as watching TV for 9 seconds. As companies standardize, they're going to start to batch actions and make them more efficient because they can have 1,000 people doing kind of the same thing at the same time. And there's ways with technology that things just become more efficient with scale. And I like to think about solar panels, how since 2010, they've become 60% cheaper and 40% more efficient. And that's a technology that I think a lot of people in our community do support. And it's just helpful to see how technology improves over time. It gets better. When it first starts out, usually with AI, it hasn't really been validated and it's just scaled so fast, and that's part of the problem. But I'm pretty confident that it's going to become a lot more efficient and better over time. So after that, we'll launch into understanding AI. I like to think of AI as a helpful assistant that you can take.
Recording in progress. Like talking about like the individual ingredients that make compost, or the whole the ratio.
Unfortunately, I'm not able to mute people. Um, so, oh, sorry about that. I like to think of AI as a helpful assistant who can be with you every step along the way. It's not going to do the work for you, but it can break things down, ask better questions, improve your writing, and save you a lot of time. So I like to think of AI as an intern, somebody who maybe has a lot of energy and is eager to please you, but doesn't really know what the end product needs to look like. Right? Like they have technical skills, they can do some things really, really well, but ultimately, you're the expert on your business. You're responsible for everything that it creates that you kind of sign off on. And you have to be really careful to be monitoring what it's saying and actually validating and making sure that it's true. So what AI can and can't do, one is it can translate confusing language. Grants use a lot of jargon and a lot of industry language, so it can help you to understand more of what they're looking for. It can help you organize ideas really, really quickly, structure your budgets, structure different pieces of the grant. It can also identify where there are gaps, whether in your story, in your budget, or in something that the funder is asking for that you're not providing. And then it can help improve clarity from an outsider's perspective. A lot of times when we write, we have things that we know, we assume everybody knows, but AI is really good at helping to tease out all those assumptions. What AI can't do is invent capacity. This is actually one of the biggest challenges with AI is that it will write and invent capacity, but it can't actually create it in your business. And so um, it'll kind of like make over promise at times and make things up where if you aren't paying attention, it will kind of make a promise for you that you then are responsible to commit to deliver on. It also can't guarantee competitiveness. A lot of grants, we'll talk about this later, but they're designed for something specific, and AI can be a little bit encouraging, a little too encouraging at times, and it'll say, yes, you know, this is a very clever way of approaching this grant application, and technically you could apply and do it, but they might not really understand what is going to be the most competitive unless there's a very specific rubric outlined. They also can't replace real numbers. You have to give them all the budget numbers, all the impact numbers. When they create things, oftentimes they can get you in a tough spot. It also can't replace strategic thinking. I think it does a extremely good job of helping facilitate strategic thinking by asking good questions and drawing things out of us. But you're still the one who's going to have to be very interactive. And then ultimately, it can't take responsibility for the end product. Only you are going to be able to do that. So um, I found that with AI, a lot of the discussion thus far has focused on prompting, and it's kind of like, how do you get the perfect prompt? You have the context and the goal and the reasoning, and that can be very helpful. But I found that AI is actually developing a lot faster than that, and so rather than trying to have the perfect prompt where you're just trying to give it one thing and get one result, our focus generally revolves around involving it in an entire process and giving it a lot of information throughout the entire process that it can consecutively build on, and give it all the information that it needs to work on. So when you're applying for a grant, a lot of times people will start with just like, I want to do this. They start with just talking about the project. But really what you need to do is start out by talking about your business and saying things like what your value added, what you make, what you sell, what funding you're applying for, what stage your business is, who your customers are, things like that. This is very similar content to what's in a business plan. And so if you have a business plan, we would always upload that into AI. You can print emails from your team. You can make a big, messy bullet point list of ideas. I think that modern grant applications are actually really well suited for AI because, particularly as you move up and get into the federal level, they are extremely detailed about what they want. And that's where AI excels. The more structure AI has, the better it is. And so grant applications are built around giving you structure. So when it's very specific, that's when it's going to be the most useful. And so what I've done for us today is we've incorporated AI into a structured grant writing process that we're going to go over in just a minute. I do want to take a quick moment to mention that for me, when I started to use AI, I had a really big challenge because I was trying to write everything into the AI prompt box. And I found that I write all day and it's still very challenging for me because you want to make sense when you write something. And then you just have one more barrier where you're trying to think about, all right, what do I actually want to ask? Whereas most platforms have a voice to text function, or you could take a like a voice note on your phone and then you can upload it. Um, and being able to ramble your way through and um, and upload that, you actually are going to be able to move a lot faster. And you'll be amazed how well it actually understands what you're asking, even when you're just rambling and kind of talking through an idea. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to try using the voice to text function in AI. And that would be the biggest takeaway, if nothing else, today, to try that. And I bet you it'll have a pretty big impact. So that being said, grant writing is much easier with a structured process. So the narrative is where you explain details of how your project works, and it should be summarizing your work plan and your budget. When I say narrative, I mean like kind of the intro at the beginning, explaining the situation and what the end result will be, sustainability sections, that kind of thing. But really, the core piece of any grant application is your work plan and your budget. And so what most people do is they start at the top and they start working on the narrative, and then they try to like backfill the work plan at the end in the budget and just kind of like brush those together. But really, if you work on your work plan and your budget at the front end and really finalize those with AI, then AI can get 90% of the rest of the application done very quickly because you already have all of the very specific details about um, about what you're actually accomplishing in the grant project. So do the hard work to do that, and then AI can move you forward pretty quickly after that. So AI doesn't win grants. It's really the structured process and the structured thinking. But AI can make that go much faster. So I'm excited to share our process. So we have a 7-step structure in the AI for Ag Funding Guide. And it's going to walk people through a disciplined process for using AI effectively. Each step builds on the previous one to take you through first, making sure that AI understands your business. Second, AI understands the grant project you're applying for. Third, it'll help you to use AI to design your project and refine kind of the idea. Then it'll help to build out the budget in the proper form that you need, then to create a work plan, then to actually write the narrative and the supporting documents that you need for the application, and then finally to do the review and submission. So are you able to see a document right now? Let's assume so. So this is the document, and this is something that I'm going to share out to everybody who signed up for this talk. I'm happy to make it available as a PDF, and it just takes you through the basic steps, and then it gives a brief overview of kind of like what we're trying to accomplish in this step, what context you need to give and add into your AI platform in order to take this step. If you don't have it, I could give you some information about like how to take a voice note and just kind of ramble through and give the information. Like if you don't have a business plan, right? Like just talk through these basic ideas with in a voice note as well as you can and upload that into AI and then ask it to make you something. Um, and then we have specific copy paste prompts for each of the sections where you can copy this over, and then it takes you through to make sure that AI is actually understanding. So each of them specifically make sure that AI understands what's going on before you move into the next step. Um, and so we'll kind of talk about what each of these steps are, but this resource is something that you'll have access to afterwards. I wanted to do more of like live showing it, putting it into AI. I don't have the most confidence that that will go well. I do have some live demonstration at the very end, but first we'll just kind of talk through the different steps and how AI can help you. But just know that this is a 21-page document. You don't have to read it. That's the nice thing is that most of it is just copy paste prompts that you can use. But it kind of walks you through it very slowly through the different stages. Okay, so let's keep moving on this one. So first, the first step is to make sure that AI understands your business. So before you even look at a grant, you need to make sure that AI understands your business clearly. And honestly, it's something that helps us to understand our business clearly. When you're forced to put something down onto paper, that forces you to articulate and think critically about different pieces that maybe are a little bit hazy. And so it can force you to understand where are you today? What is your real capacity for production, for sales, for your operations team, things like that. What are your bottlenecks? Sometimes we think that we just need to scale up in order to be profitable, but a lot of times maybe we're being inefficient and we have other bottlenecks that we don't have to scale in order to make more money. Maybe we're actually losing money on our current products and scaling up is going to lose us more money. And so we really need to think about what are like our margins on our products and what are the things that are causing the most problem and creating inefficiencies in our business. And then what growth are you ready for? One is your long-term plan, 1 to 3, like 1 to 3 years, maybe more than that. But then what can you immediately take action on today? I find that we use AI to create reusable content libraries. These are big, hairy documents that are intended to have all the information you would ever put into a grant application. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I remember um, when you like apply for jobs or when you apply for something and you have to put in the same information over and over again. And maybe on the first one, you type it out and you put in a lot of detail, but then by the time you're putting it into the fifth something, you're being really short. You're putting in barely any detail. This content library is designed so that you can put a lot of effort into making a detailed explanation that's in a Word document that you have access to quickly, and then you copy paste it into each news section rather than having to rewrite it each time. So AI can help you both understand what you need to have on hand. It can help you refine it and make a better version of that. And then it can also make it more accessible and integrate it with other pieces of information. And then it can serve as a key document. Ours end up being 50 pages long that every time we go and use AI, we upload the content library and we say, this is the context for this client. Here's, the details of their business. Here's other grants they've worked on. Here are the partnerships that we have. Here, it just has way more information than is necessary, but it gives it a lot of information to pull from and it really saves you a lot of time by creating it once. So that's where we use AI in that. And again, in that guide, there's a walkthrough of how to do it. So go and do that, create that for your own business. That is an ongoing process. We create it once and then we just, every time we do a new grant, we are updating it and making it a better resource for the next time. After that, you want to understand the specific grant you're applying for. So one of the biggest and challenges or most demoralizing things is when you spend 30 or 40 hours on a grant application and then they announce the awards and all of the people who got the awards were very similar to each other and nothing like you, right? So usually that means you never stood a chance to get the grant. So there's a big difference between being eligible for a grant and being competitive for a grant. And so you can use AI to help you assess, are you actually a good fit for this program? I have been pleasantly surprised actually recently with how well AI can ask questions. There are a lot of gaps that it has in its understanding, but if there are things like a rubric, it can really be specific about this is what is going to get the most points. And it does a good job of if you give it enough information about your business, it can ask you critical questions about like, is this actually aligned with your goals, right? What you're proposing in this project seems a lot different than what your current business is. And here's where that might be really challenging for you as a business. Do you have the time to implement this, or do you have enough money to do a reimbursement grant, things like that? So when you're understanding the grant, you really want to focus in on what is the problem that the funder is trying to solve. Um, if you um, if you if you can't like state that very specifically, you're not going to do a good job. All grant writing is sales. You're selling your idea and your project to a funder. And so you really need to understand what are they looking to buy in order to get the grant. You can have a great story, but if you're not aligned with the specific things that they're looking for, you're not going to be very competitive. You also need to understand who scores the application. That will give you a lot of information about how you should write it. If it's going to be a community group of people who are like volunteers, you might want to take a more like community focused style, more informal writing that like really endears you and talk about the community impact. If it's going to be professionally scored by business people, you want to take a more formal tone, impartial third party, right? So like understanding who is looking at this application is going to help you understand how to speak their language a little bit better. You also want to understand what costs are allowed. It might be a good project for you, but they only support certain types of costs, ones that you're not interested in submitting. So that can help you understand that it's not a good fit right away. And then what outcomes are required. All grants have reporting metrics, usually numbers. So if they want to see your revenue be increased by some amount, or they want to see a certain number of people trained. And so if you look at their outcomes, that can be a really quick way to understand, is this actually a good fit for what you're wanting to do? After you have a good understanding of, after AI understands that, and we'll go through a little bit of the back and forth that it can show you, and helps you understand, all right, AI now understands the grant really well. It understands my business really well. Now I'm going to talk through and brainstorm about what my project idea is. And you want to design and then test your alignment with the grant. So the only story that the matters is the one that the funder cares about. Like I said, um, they have very specific goals. You can be a great business, but it may not they may not care. They can only really support what their stated goals are. Um, this is really important that it's actually driven by your strategy as a farm. I see a lot of people wanting to chase free money, and it can be a really dangerous or slippery slope because grants come with a lot of strings attached. You're going to spend a lot of time to apply, to manage, to report on this grant. And I've worked with a lot of people who have had grants in the past that, they regret, even though they got money, but it was just way more work than they thought. And it ended up distracting them from what was actually core to their business and what was going to be moving their business forward. So you need to make sure that your project idea is actually driven by your business strategy and that it matches the funder goals, that you have some kind of outcomes that are measurable, and if it's realistic with your current team. A big part of this design and test alignment portion is understanding what you can do internally and what partners you might need to engage. That can oftentimes be one of the longer portions of a grant application is finding partners and talking with other people to clarify what the scope is. Like, what are they going to do for the project? How much are they going to be paid? That is not a short process. Usually, the more grants you apply to, the better it is because you're talking with the same people many times and you can kind of refine it over time. It gets shorter and shorter, but especially that first time, understanding your team, who's involved, that can be one of the more time-consuming portions. After you have gone through that and you know that, hey, my idea does align, it's something that's good for my business, it aligns with the funder goals. Next, we want to build the budget first. We always like to make a big laundry list of budget items. You need to get accurate budget numbers, and this is the longest part of the grant writing process usually. This means real quotes, real labor costs, real timelines. Um, Everything is built off of your budget and your work plan, and so we've made the mistake of having kind of assumptions or ballpark estimates, and moving forward, writing the grant. And then a couple days before submission, you find out that something actually is twice as expensive as you were thinking, which means your entire budget is then shifted. And usually oftentimes your entire narrative then changes, and there are ripple effects throughout the rest of the application. Anytime a reviewer is looking at something and numbers are inconsistent in the application, that's one of the number one things that you then mark somebody off on. If they say that they're going to train 20 people over here and 50 people in a different section, you don't know which is true, and so you just automatically will mark them lower because there's just confusion and uncertainty in that application. And so having these budget numbers up front will save you a lot of time later in doing rewriting. It can be kind of anxiety provoking because you're waiting on this budget, but it can also it's good because it prevents you from getting lulled into a false sense of security because it would have taken you that long to get those budget numbers anyway. So it's better that you're really being intentional with it on the front end. If you have real budget numbers, I usually like to include the cost of the total project, even if the grant is not covering all of it. Not We don't include it as official match. We just mention that we're also going to be needing to cover these costs outside of the grant budget because then it shows extra buy-in. It shows that you actually understand what your real cost is, and the reviewer knows and has confidence that you understand your project inside and out. I think that can be another big thing. If you see budget numbers that are like $10,000, $5,000, every line item is a very round number, you assume they don't really know what what it's going to cost. They're just kind of throwing out some numbers to see if they can get the grant without doing the work. Um, and then there are many times costs that you're wondering if they are aware that running three-phase power to their property, is costing $100,000 a mile, right? So there are other things that you need to show and know about before you apply for the grant. After we have the big bullet point list of budget items, then we can thematically link specific budget items together to create the work plan. So your work plan should be able to tell a story without the narrative. When you have a grant contract, usually they take your work plan from your application and they put it into the contract. They usually don't take anything else from your application. Usually it's the work plan and maybe like the outcomes are the two things that they actually are taking, the budget, work plan, outcomes. Um, and so this is what actually you're agreeing to do when you apply for the grant. So this is really where I think is the most important part of a grant. And it's usually something that people are not accustomed to making because a lot of people don't do this in their everyday life. And so this is really where we're trying to drive and get AI to be the most helpful. So money in the budget, that's what's creating movement in the work plan. So you need to really define what happens first, what happens after that, who is responsible for driving each step of the process. How is progress going to be tracked if somebody checked in from the outside? How are they going to know if you're on track or not? And what are like the timelines as you go through each step? If you have your project idea done and a budget, a basic budget, this has been one of the biggest blessings of AI, I think. It can make a really good work plan that is detailed and is in a format that grant reviewers like so fast if you have your idea done and you have a strong budget. But if you go the other way, your work plan will always be terrible. You have to start with the budget because it builds it off of that and makes sure that all of the costs are actually what's driving the work plan. Next, you'll work on the narrative and the supporting documents. And this is, the space on a page, this is the bulk of a grant application. But if you already have your work plan done and you have your budget done and you kind of framed out what the basic idea was, this can be the last step. You use your work plan, the budget. Usually we like to go section by section and we say, here are the 3 to 5 main points that we want to hit on in this section strategically to make sure we're emphasizing, hey, our capacity is this. We're already growing as a business. This is just going to help us to grow faster. We have this many partners and, this. And then we give those high level overview and all the rest of the detail into AI, and it can draft the whole narrative really quickly. But if you do it in that process, it can draft it without exaggeration and without filler language. I think when you go the opposite way, the problem is AI will repeat the same paragraph like 12 times. Every question, it'll just repeat the same idea in a new way. And it can lull you into a false sense of security because it seems like it's really polished, and so you assume that it knows what it's talking about, but reviewers won't think it knows what it's talking about. It just seems like it does. And it's a lot of filler language and many times exaggeration. So after you have those two things done, your drafting your narrative is very, very easy. After that, you're just reviewing and submitting. AI can be very helpful to give you a list of attachments based on off the RFA. It can help you do a checklist, making sure that you have all the attachments. Do you have your letters? It's really helpful to draft letters for partners. It can make sure that all your numbers are consistent throughout your application. Your formatting is correct. It can read it as a skeptic. You have to specifically ask AI to be critical and a skeptic. And when you do that, it can do a much better job. If you just ask it questions, it will be very encouraging. There's also a difference between like asking it, make this sound better versus can you evaluate this and tell me if it's a good idea or evaluate it across against the grant program. Because in the first example, you're asking it to improve an idea and it will do that without too much other questioning. But really what you need is somebody to evaluate it first. And so usually what we'll do is in the guide, we have two different prompts. First is evaluation and making sure that you have a strong base. And then after you have that, it's more about improving it. So by creating two steps out of it, you're able to get a lot higher of an output. So let's see this in action. Let's give it a try. So first, I tried out using AI with very little context. I created a separate account on ChatGPT, and so it didn't have any information about any of my previous conversations or anything like that. And then I used the same chat using the structured approach, and we're going to see kind of how far it goes. So I made up a sample farm, Rooted Range Poultry. They're in Southwest Virginia, founded in 2019, a single member LLC. They have just under $250,000 in annual revenue. It's primarily driven by the owner plus a seasonal employee. 42 acres, pasture-raised broilers, and seasonal turkeys. They use a USDA inspected processing facility to process off-site. They sell direct to consumer through online pre-orders. Maybe they're doing home deliveries, also with regional farmers markets. Current challenges are limited cold storage for their finished product before they're selling it to consumers. They have an inefficient market delivery logistics, and then the owner is also stretched thin. And their goal is to expand their distribution, have more farmers market, more community pickup sites, more sales, increase revenue. So first, I just typed in, write a grant proposal for my small poultry dairy to build a cold storage so we can grow and expand our business. And this is what we got. I guess I could probably, I put it into a sheet, but I also have it here. So you can see. Ask them this, and this is what they have. And it's, I mean, this is like 3, 4 pages of content, right? And at first look, it's really exciting because it's like, oh wow, I don't have to do anything. This is great. Um, but there are some pieces that are a little bit concerning. So things like this, where it says increase poultry processing volume by 20 to 30% within 12 months, right? So it's pulling out. Oh, hello. It invented percentage increases without me putting in any kind of revenue numbers. It made up a lot of assumptions about the business, which can be helpful because if you're really paying attention and going through it and correcting them, you can correct it. But the problem is that it gives it this as fact on the front end. It also assumes we have wholesale buyers, assumes things like our sustainable practices. It has a whole section about like humane and sustainable practices. It talked about gap compliance, and also talked about a yield increase without providing any kind of math. So um, the idea here is that it kind of goes a little too far, right? And I think it's personally sometimes harder to go through and verify all these things. So rather than using just a basic prompt and having a lot of stuff that then is incorrect and it's a lot of fluff without real context on your business, we can instead um, go through the steps to give it real context, make sure that we have alignment, and then be building the budget. So when we did that, I spent about 10 minutes uploading voice notes into AI and asked it to create a content library for me. And for that, it came up with this. And so things like it has the details, and I just copy pasted this. Usually, when we do things like content libraries, I personally don't really like their formatting very much, so I wouldn't leave it like this, but you can. I searched it in it, and then it gave me, oh no, this was, I actually didn't put in the content library creation one on here. But I put in those details and it gave me a basic breakdown, right? Of product services, revenue, our capacity, our operational bottlenecks, financial snapshot, our growth goals, prior investments, things like that. Um, and then it asks a lot of good questions, right? So you upload this along with I used the I uploaded the content library and I used the first prompt from our guide to make sure that AI understands your business. So this is the prompt I uploaded into here. And it does a good job of then re-summarizing the business, right? How you make money, the primary sales channels, target customers, financial snapshot, what our growth is, partnerships, and grant readiness. Then I think it actually does a really good job of asking five additional clarifying questions, right? And this is where what we would normally do is I would record myself answering these five questions, and then you can ask it to integrate that into your content library content. And then I would copy paste that and put it into my content library document. As it gets longer and longer, usually it'll like just make edits to specific sections that you can then move over rather than redoing the whole thing. But at this first level, you can kind of remake the whole thing at once. But it asks specifically, I didn't upload a profit and loss for this example, but it wants that because that'll give it a lot more data that it needs to reference. It asks if you have a formal business plan. Do you have like actual estimates already for the future expansion? It doesn't know that we're applying for a grant at this point. It just knows that we're trying to take that next step. So it's starting to ask you and prompt you to do the next step in the process. And then yeah, do you have any assistance that you could help ask for a grant? So I'm pretty impressed with the output, even just from the first step. Ideally, we're going to be able to then refine our content library, and then over time, it'll get better and better. But even with just what we have thus far, I didn't answer any of those questions. I next uploaded the Business Builder Grant Application Guidelines from the Appalachian Regional Food Business Center. And let's see what I did there. So I uploaded the budget and the PDF, and then the prompt that we have in the guide. And it gives us a nice overview of the specific Appalachian business grant program. So who qualifies, who does not qualify. They do a really good job of just restating what is in the grant because it's pretty easy to copy paste. What is nice about the prompt is we also ask it to give us where we appear well aligned. So it can say like these are the things that are a good overlap, and then where it can be weak or less competitive, and what questions we should be clarifying about the grant program before we are putting together a grant project idea, right? So this is where I think it kind of starts to lose some of its luster. Um, There are some limitations on its interpretation if things aren't explicitly stated. So an example is, would cold storage unit that requires minor site prep be considered construction? And I would know that that's not really. It's going to be considered equipment if it's a unit, if it's a walk-in storage unit that you can purchase and have delivered. If you're having to actually like build walls, it's considered construction. But with the grant, they don't have as much context about kind of like industry norms. I think you can develop that over time in the content library, and that might be something that we try to create that could be added to the guide to like educate the AI over time. But things like that, there are kind of like limited. You could get that from somebody, other farmers, or maybe some other technical service providers. And then, but things that they do ask really well are things like how heavily weighted are distressed community points, because there's not a rubric. And that's something that's very grant specific that we would normally reach out and ask the funder about because they say that you get points for having being in a distressed community, but they don't really clarify how heavily those are weighted, how big of a difference that makes. And that's the kind of thing that is really frustrating because you might think that you are going to be competitive and you're not really overlapping with distressed communities. You apply and then you find out that everybody else was in a distressed community and probably just shouldn't have applied at all, right? I'm not talking about this program in particular, just giving an example. Um, so that's really good. We didn't clarify all those things about the grant, but I just went ahead and went into the next step, which is using AI to create a project overview and uploaded it with the prompt. So here I created a project overview of what the basic idea is, and it can do a great job now that it understands what the grant program is and what my farm is. I say, all right, specifically, we want to focus on things like our cold storage, improving our transportation and distribution. We want to focus on our inventory management and then do a little bit of marketing and then hire some people to help with our distribution. And it can really flesh out additional details about those and it understands what gaps it's filling and can do it a lot faster. Um, and then um, the aggregation model is something that I added in after the fact. So first I gave it the project overview, and I thought it did a really good job of pushing back on me. And specifically, we ask it to be critical and not to be very encouraging. But I thought it did a really good job. So it it says that your original code storage expansion alone would not clearly align. It would read as internal farm growth. And anybody who's familiar with the business builders, they were very focused on regional. Sometimes you could do it just to impact your business, but they were generally more competitive, at least in the Appalachia region, of like impacting multiple producers at once, and showing like you're building the supply chain, um, the local food system. And it pushes back on this idea that like, oh yeah, we're going to be like aggregating for other farmers if you give us a cold storage. It really pushes back and says it has to be real and operational, not theoretical. And it even talks about if reviewers perceive it as being theoretical instead of concrete. And I think that's a pretty nuanced point that it's not just about what it actually is, but how it's perceived in how you present it. And then it gives good examples about how you could be more convincing. Things like having formal relationships articulated with other producers, having letters from them, um, stuff like that. It's the challenge with that. Um, so it says partially not automatically, right? It shows that it does align well, but it says where it's weak. I think it sets the bar a little bit high. Um, like it says that you need to have cold storage accessible to 10 plus producers, which I mean, and that you're going to become a regional food hub. And that's a little bit more than I think the grant is really asking somebody to do. This is based off of a client that we worked with and was able to get the grant with this basic idea. Um, and it was a lot less than creating a food hub. So I think it kind of, if you're asking it to be critical, it'll go to the extreme end of being critical. If you don't ask it to, it's on the extreme end of being encouraging. So it still is picking up nuance, but I'd rather it be too overly critical and then check in with the funders, then move from there. So it talks about this, um, and I really like how it highlights the capacity reality check. So because it understands your business and it's not only evaluating the grant project, it also then says, hey, this is currently where you're at. And if you do this project as you're currently talking to me about it, um, it's yeah, one of your biggest challenges is just your execution. Like, do you have the time to onboard new people? Do you have the money to do this? It's a reimbursement style grant, which means that you pay up front and then you get reimbursed. Do you have the money to make this realistic for your cash flow? Have you documented that other farms are interested? And so I think it does a really good job of giving you back. And then this is just a voice text. So this is how you do it. When you click dictate, you could um, just speak to it. And so I responded to its questions. And I said, yes, I think it's a good shift for my business. I already do some informal coordination with 5 or 6 other producers in my areas to help deliver their products to my customers when I'm doing home deliveries. This grant would be a great opportunity to formalize that relationship a little bit. I'm confident I could get letters from all of them, and some of those farmers are in disadvantaged counties. So I could potentially help the score, help receive in the grant, also help us to fill up our delivery vehicle fuller without any extra expense. And that could help us to, make each delivery more efficient and potentially bring in new customers who are interested in other products that these farmers would be selling. Can you help me look at this idea again and refine the project idea that I gave you to reflect this new information? And so then it kind of talks strategically about it. I'm going to scroll through it quickly. And I say, all right, that's great. Now can you recreate the project overview content? And it'll remake the full idea that integrates this idea of cold storage and the mini aggregation. I didn't mention previously that we had 5 or 6 participating farms, but because it was pushing back on me, that prompted me to add in that additional information. And so that's one of the bigger things I'd say with AI is the more critical you can make it, the more it asks you for information, the more information you give it, the better everything becomes. So from there, we would just keep going. Switch back over. Um, hello. So I would encourage you to download the AI for Ag Funding Guide. Take it, use it, adapt it, improve it. This is something that I think obviously AI is developing quickly, so it'll need to be continuously updated. But everything that we've worked through today is in this guide, and it also has prompts for the next step of developing your budget, developing your work plan, writing out the rest of the narrative. Honestly, if you've gone through those first 3 steps that I've just shown you, though, you're going to be so well set up for even if you didn't use AI, you'd really have clarity around what you're trying to accomplish. Um, so it has all those step-by-step prompts. It has some templates in it. It has a compliance checklist. I'm going to send it to people through the website, but you feel free also to reach out to me directly. I can send you the presentation and guide. I wanted to wrap up today quickly by sharing a little bit about Stewards Unlimited. We believe that a steward is trustworthy, helpful, and competent. We help people to identify, design, and win funding. We also like to connect people with other resources, and we like to try to be a one-stop shop to connect people with other technical service providers or non-financial or grant opportunities. Our biggest passion is working with farmers to improve the long-term sustainability of our regional food systems. Really have so much respect for food and farm businesses. We would like to take what is already built and use it to create new growth. And we try to be helpful, competent, and trustworthy in every interaction. We find that who we serve best are values-driven food and farm businesses who have 3 to 10 years of experience and already have a solid footing. Usually they have over $100,000 in annual revenue and they're ready to scale, expand their impact, build new enterprises, help other farmers. Usually they need to have financial and operational capacity, and they view grants as a strategic investment, not as a way to subsidize or fix a business model that is not working. For people who are in that position or before it, we have a free grant alert system. If this is a link, or it's also on our website, where if you select tags based on your business, say I'm in California, I'm a row crop producer, or I'm a, organic, market garden. We send out grants on a weekly basis, and it's completely free. We don't use your information for anything else. Would encourage you to sign up, and we send out information about things that are ever evolving. And I've been very surprised over the last year how many funding opportunities come up and are only available one time, and you never heard about them, and they have 2 weeks to apply, and then they're gone. So that's really what we focus on is how do you be prepared as a business, and then how do you move quickly when there's an opportunity, rather than right now with the grant funding landscape, it's hard to plan a year in advance for some of these grant programs. So I'd encourage you to sign up for those. Overall, we would love to be your steward. So I'd love, happy to answer questions now about this content, anything about grant writing, any specific grant programs. We offer free consultations if anybody wants to reach out on this contact form or through our website. Happy to have a one-on-one conversation about your particular situation and what grants might be accessible to your business at this time. Would love to be a resource moving forward. But other than that, I think we'll open it up to questions. And I think at this time, I can open up the chat and see if there are questions in there. But also, I think because we're all here, people could unmute and ask questions. So it might get a little bit crazy. I don't know if Guido is available to help facilitate any of that process, but we can kind of take it as we go.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna echo Juliet Norton in the chat saying, great presentation, Stephen. Thank you so much. And there's about 40 people, so I think we can manage trying to just letting people unmute themselves freely and take turns if you have any questions. Someone's asking how can we contact you to receive this? The email, um, it's on the screen. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. If you can't find the button, you should scroll to the bottom left of your screen. So we'll give people a little bit of time.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm currently at a farmer's market. And so I've been in and out while the market gets set up. But I'm curious if in this guide there are any recommendations for kind of centralized resources to find these grants.
There is not in this specific guide. The grant alerts is probably the number one that we'd recommend. It's free. There are some paid services and there are lots of databases, but I find that most of them are not kept up to date, which is kind of the challenge. Number one, I would just recommend, I'd be happy to have a conversation about your particular situation and see what I can recommend. Right now, it's like there's grants that were a sure thing that are no longer, and then there are ones that are popping up from like private organizations that I wouldn't have anticipated. So,
Got it. Thank you.
Hi there.
hello.
Hi, Stephen. It's Lori Goldberg. Thank you so much. This was a great presentation, really helpful.
Good.
I was just curious I noticed the demo was ChatGPT. Do you use it like Claude or any other, or Instrumental? There's so many different AI tools. Do you have favorites, and kind of have you tried out some of the other ones? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are the best tools for ag grant writing.
Yeah, that's a good question. And unfortunately, we haven't. I've used ChatGPT almost exclusively. We have used Gemini, and we found that we internally don't like the writing voice for grants as much, but we're trying to use Gemini more for like our processes and workflows because we use a lot of the Gmail suite. So I've not explored. I've heard good things about Perplexity, but unfortunately can't give much of a recommendation beyond that. The guide is designed to be agnostic though, so that's why we kind of brought it back to the prompt stage where you could put it into any AI platform and it should be able to.
Right. Thank you.
Hmm.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you, Juliet, And Daniela, for reminding people, we have a fun database. The link is on the chat. That might help Ben too. Um, yeah, we still have 10 minutes. So if you have any questions about AI for Ag funding, now's the time. Of course, you can always contact Stephen using the information on the screen. But yeah,
I'll ask a quick question. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was super helpful to hear how to orient and prep. In terms of writing the actual narrative, I've found a little bit in my work that the narrative itself becomes overly repetitive when I use uh, AI, and I think you sort of did allude to that. And then I also find that the writing style is like really limited, like the sentence structures are like kind of the same over and over. I was wondering what your experience with that has been, or if you really just use this for the prep and then you do the writing on your own, or how that translates to a narrative.
That's a great question. I think I haven't quite figured out what I would recommend others do. The fortunate thing for us is that we have so many grants that we have written that we can upload a lot of samples and we can say, hey, match this style of writing, this tone, this sentence structure, and use our own writing as an example. And I don't know yet how I could recommend people do that. You can request um, successful grants from a lot of funders, with the Freedom of Information Act. So go crazy with that if you want. But um, you could you could also upload other forms of your writing. I like ChatGPT's almost de facto. It's very like business, and usually we're doing federal level grants that you want to be a little bit more polished. And so I tend to like the something close to the way that it speaks, but I also was able to upload a lot of samples. And then as far as the repetitive nature, that's where I find it's really helpful to not not have it write the narrative in paragraph form. Usually I'll say, here are all the sections. Give me like 3 to 5 bullet points for each one about the key information that we want to highlight here. And then I go through and audit that. And I say, like, all right, let's keep this very concise, only focused on this piece. And if I find that those bullet points are the same in different sections, I'll then edit them and add more context. Or ask it, what other things could I add into this section that would help add to our point that is information you don't currently have. And it can do a good job of saying, if I had demographic data about this county, or if I usually don't ask it to do research for me. I find that usually is just like more work to check its work than I can do it myself. But it's helpful to say, here's something that can support the idea that you're promoting here. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. That's super helpful. Thank
Awesome.
you.
It does look like we have some hands. So, Indy, do you have a question?
I do. Thanks, Stephen. I'm curious what your perspective is on like utilizing AI versus and it's like an and or kind of question, building relationships with the people who are doing like giving you the like handing out the funds because
Hmm.
I always feel like there's like this nuance of like nepotism or like if they know you they're gonna like and so like does the AI should the AI support that or like should people like yeah so I just want your perspective on that.
Yeah, I like that. And also good to see you. We're in the food co-op initiative
Oh
group
yeah.
together. So good to see
Oh
you.
heck yeah, nice.
Um, we I would say that when you look at private donors, right, like private foundations or community funders, that's where relationships are the most important. It's good to also have relationships with like your rural development office or your local NRCS office, things like that. Um, but I find that usually on the federal or state level, scoring is less subjective. It tends to be more following a rubric, and that's where AI really shines. In those private donors or like more nonprofit style funding, um, those relationships, I would play it case by case because I think some of them probably would be put off by AI. And usually when you use AI, you can tell. So even if you're using it well, that might put them off, and it'd be more important to understand how they would perceive it. But ultimately, you'd want to continue to do that relationship building regardless of whether you're using AI to develop the content or not. It's just a tool that goes alongside of it.
Thanks.
Cheetah, could I answer your question?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you, Stefan. I really enjoyed this presentation, but I have a question. One, uh, did I miss something that we say you have a prompt, but that we can really use to really guide I mean, to really ask the AI? And also, I would want to say, when you, I mean, it has become a standard that when you have you write, I mean, you use AI to really write your grant for you. It is the funder kind of just have to really check to see if you use AI to really write this thing or you write it on your own. And this, and do you use anything to really kind of check before you even submit it out? Thank
Yeah,
you.
definitely would recommend you're ultimately responsible for everything that's written down. So reading it all in detail is important. We've seen some funders, I don't know if we've seen any funders, but we've seen like some businesses start to say you can't use large language models when you're developing things. So that's possible. Some funders might say you can't use AI um, in your grant, and then they have things that they can use to check and see if AI has been used. Um, I would also say that I think honestly, there will be people who do that, but long term, I don't think that's going to be a huge issue because what I think that is going to happen next, and I'm very excited about for funders, and going maybe back to Indy's question, is I think funders are eventually going to create an AI chatbot that is a that perfectly understands the grant program, and you can then talk to about your project idea, and it can have so much more nuance than what they want to put into the current, like right now they just make a document that can maybe sometimes it's 3 pages, sometimes it's 70 pages. But eventually they're going to, I think, create AI agents that is that document, and you can just talk to them, and it has infinite like understanding of the program, and you can just like really have a nuanced conversation. It's like you're getting access to the funder directly through AI, whereas right now it's usually you can't get a lot of FaceTime with them. So that's what I'd be looking forward to. I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but I would, Cheetah, did you have a question as well?
Yeah, just really quick, I was curious when it comes to uploading grant criteria or the call for submission, is that the paid version of ChatGTP? And does Gemini have that capability as well?
No, so the one that I was going over today is the free version. I think they do limit how many chats you can have, and it doesn't save your history. But I would also say you don't want to save anything in ChatGPT anyways. That's why in the guide we have like copy everything into a Word document, use it to create something, but like keep your own record of it. And you can upload documents, you can upload things and do chats, and it should be functional with the free version. And I think it is also the same with Gemini. I think we might be at about our time. I
Yeah,
know we can wrap up by the 15th.
maybe we can give 1 minute to Chuya Moa, who's got one question, and we can wrap after that.
Oh, I think Stefan already answered the question. And but lastly, you were mentioning about the prompt. I mean, did I don't know if I missed something, but how can we access to that prompt so that I can guide this to us a little bit?
So we have it in a document that we're going to send through. I'll send it to everybody through the website. I think I don't know exactly how it works, but I think Guido is going to help me to send you both the presentation and the PDF of the prompt guide to everybody who registered for this. Or you can feel free to reach out to me directly at our website or my email, and I can send it to you directly as well.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Awesome.